Okay, back on the 70 International Travelette. I don't really even know where to start today. I've opened up a huge can of worms. You can see we've got the rear end out and up on the bench. It's got to be redone from one end to the other. But I got a wild idea. I don't know if I mentioned or not earlier, but I have a parts truck that I bought for this project that was an 89 F250. This chassis is a 94 F350, was a dually. And my original plan was to change this over to F250 rear end, F250 front hubs, and just have single wheels, and it would fit perfect under this body. And the parts rear end I bought was also a 355 gear, which is what I wanted instead of the 410. I thought, hey, no problem. I'll just swap rear ends, swap front hubs. I'll be good to go. Well, yeah, all good plans. So anyway, we got the swapping rear end, and of course found out that my F250 rear end was wore out. I mean, everything about it was worn out from gear to hubs. No big deal. I've got a brand new 355 gear that a buddy of mine gave me that he bought and never used. And so no big deal. We were going to build the rear end, and I wanted to put a pause in it. I just didn't want to do that at this stage of the project. So then we get this wild idea that, hey, let's do a narrowed dually. Let's keep this thing a dually. I really liked the way the dually wheels looked on the front. And I really like the way the duals look in the back. I just don't want a full width dually. I don't want to have to build fender extensions for my bed. And, you know, these trucks are really slick down the side, and that just wasn't what I wanted. But then I got the bright idea, well, this F250 rear end is somewhere around 6 inches narrower. And I thought, hey, I'll just put the dually wheels on those hubs. Hubs are the same. And this will be a piece of cake. So we swapped rear end out and just kind of got it bolted up loosely, bolted the duals up, and the inner tire barely rubbed the spring. In other words, you're going to rub the spring right in this area with the inner wheel. I thought, well, okay, let's see if we can figure out a way around that. It looked killer with the narrow dually under it. The outer wheel's not going to stick out much past the bed, and we're just not going to have to do much to deal with that. And so that's really what I wanted. So okay, we'll overcome this. So I need to relocate springs. So got thinking about that. So we had some spacers machined, moved the spring 5/8 of an inch inboard. We cut out the whole back part of the spring mount and then added this plate, which comes down, and it's also got a spacer to give some thickness, and new grade 8 spring bolt. And that, I mean, that's way stouter than what the factory mount was. And I've still got some, you know, fill in to do, a little bit of gusseting, but it's super strong. So it's like, okay, no problem there. And then you come to the back and thought, well, we'll build some offset shackles. Now, I had a parts truck, so I had double sets of shackles and everything, so I was able to cut pieces out of 2 shackles and do the offset. And this is just kind of how it starts out. And you can see we've gotten rid of that bolt and done a countersunk, a little bit of trimming, and the fact that we actually extended the hanger a 1/2 inch higher, it gave us more clearance as it comes up in this area. This thing arches right through here. So we were able to kick that over about 3/4 of an inch, something like that. And so that part's going to work no problem. And then here's the one for the other side that's a little further along. You can see as you start gusseting that back, you know, it goes like this. And that's going to be a super strong piece. One set that I had just recently been replaced, so the bushings are good in them. So we're taking the best of everything we got. Oh, we also swapped springs. These springs are actually out of the 250, which are the same. You just add the overload leaves on the top for the 350. And these springs were in better shape than the ones off the 350. So again, we're trying to take all the best of our parts and put it on this truck. So anyway, that seems like, okay, no problem. We'll move springs, and then of course we've got the issue with our perches. If you're gonna move the springs inboard, then you gotta move this centering hole. Well, you could just re-drill this centering hole 5/8 of an inch over and let your spring overlap the perch. And again, it'd probably be fine, but that didn't suit me. So I had, and excuse the mess, this is what happens when you get deep into these things. So we took some 1-inch solid stock and had this milled out where that goes over that factory perch, and then we can re-drill our centering hole over 5/8 of an inch. The spring will sit on this plate, have full contact. And again, this thing locks onto the, I mean, it's just solid. It locks onto that factory perch, and then your U-bolts will clamp everything together. So, all right, that opens up another can of worms. Then your U-bolt plates have got to be wider. So, like I say, we have 2 of everything. So we took the U-bolt plates and we cut those 5/8 wider out of 2, out of 4, and welded them together. You can see that center hole used to be round. It's now oval. That means nothing. It's not going to hurt us as far as, that just kind of helps center the plate. It doesn't really center the rear end. So anyway, we took these, and they're very, very well welded, you know, lots of penetration and everything. And that's going to spread our U-bolts out wide enough to straddle that plate. We are going to have to notch this plate in this area and this area and just a little bit in the corners, just so the U-bolts can clear it. But that'll also help lock everything together. Okay, so no big deal. We've accomplished all that. So we should just be able to bolt all this in. So we started out, we were going to use the F250 brakes, which are a little narrower than the F350. But again, for this truck and anything I'll ever need to do, it'd be killer brakes. Well, the dually wheels won't quite bolt up. I mean, they'll bolt up, but they hit the drum before they seat about 1/8 of an inch onto the hub. And of course, right here, these are your hubs. Hubs are the same, 250, 350, with the exception of they drive an alignment pin in one of them. But you can see this raised area here. That's what centers your wheel. And when you put the dually wheel up on the 250 brake drum, that first step is where the brake drum goes, and then the wider step is where the 2 wheels go. If you have a dually, if you have a single wheel, like the 250, it just slides up on the first part. So the dually wheel would hit the F250 brake drum. It's like, okay, whatever. We'll just put the F350 brakes back on it. That's even better. You know, they're 3.5 inch wide, big old massive drums, you know, bigger's better. Let's just do that. So I had all the backing plates and everything to do that with. So we started bolting it up, and I'm like, something is different about this rear end between the F250 and the 350. And I'm measuring the hub stubs and links and, you know, everything measured out the same. And then it dawned on me. Right here is where the plate, the backing plate goes for an F250. And you can see it's got a little lip, this machine, where the backing plate centers up. Well, on an F350, the backing plate is recessed this way, and I thought that's how they got the extra width. Well, they got part of it there, but here's where the plate is mounted for the F350. So I'm like, great, we've got to relocate these. And they are welded. I mean, that's some of the prettiest weld all the way around you'll ever see. So that's got to be cut off. So I'm like, okay, how can I get these back on here and get everything perfect and right where it's supposed to be? So had a friend of mine machine these plates, and there's a good bit of work in that because he had to start with a piece of 3/8 and machine that lip. He had to bore the center hole. So we would have that lip right there for the brake drum to go on. So when he got done with that, then I took and split the plate so you could put it on in halves. I had him make 4 spacers that are identical. 1 3/8 is the difference. We measured back and forth between the 2 rear ends, and you're wanting from right here is just a touch under 9.5 inches to where the F350 will mount, the F350 backing plate. So with this bolted in tight, all I got to do now is come back in here and weld that plate in, and it'll stay straight. It'll be in the perfect location. Then I have to come back here and do all the hard work of cutting this plate off and getting it ground, because it's got to be ground back pretty smooth, because your backing plate's got to go up over it. I mean, you could leave a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to grind down into the tube, but good bit of work there. Of course, we got to do both ends. Once we've done this end, we'll take our spacers off and come down here. Here's one of the spacers as it came off of the out of the machine shop. Let me get it off here. So this is what we started with. So he does nice work. And then again, like I say, when we split it, that lets us put it on in 2 halves, and then once it's clamped back together, you know, that gap's not gonna matter. You're gonna weld all that up. So that gets us to being able to, our springs are narrowed, and we've worked out the perch issue. We've worked out the U-bolt issue, springs, mounting plates for the backing plates. Out of the 4 hubs I had 2 hubs that had really good bearings in them, so we'll rebuild those, clean them up, put new seals on them. And then the next step is, of course, we've still got all of this to clean up, and we've actually got to build the rear end and clean up the housing and paint it. So I wanted to do a pause unit. And when I got to looking into, this is not the first time I've built one of these rear ends, because our car hauler has got this same rear end, and I've built it twice, changing gears and doing different things. So it's not my first rodeo, but things have changed in the last few years. I got to looking at buying a pause and an install kit and bearings and, you know, gear and all that. You can put $2,000 in one of these rear ends real quick. And that's not in the budget around here. So, like I said, a buddy of mine gifted me with a 355 gear. So that's new, ready to go. And then I bought a good bearing puller. And again, out of both rear ends I've got a good usable set of carrier and pinion bearings. Someone had been into one of these rear ends recently, so it had some pretty decent stuff in it. So all that stuff is reusable. That'll save a bunch of money on bearings. We got our tone ring off of one of them that triggers your speed sensor. I bought a used factory pause unit off eBay, and messaged with the guy a little bit, and he assured me, he said, yeah, this was fine when we took it out. You should be able to put it in and run it. Again, I'm not worried about it being perfect right now, but it was fairly clean when it came in. And anyway, that'll get us on the road. If down the road I need to, you know, put clutches in it or whatever, I can, but it'll be fine right now for what we're doing. I just wanted, with this being a 2-wheel drive truck, I really wanted a pause in it, because you back it off in the grass with a load or a trailer or something, and you need that extra little bit of help. We're not drag racing with it. You know, we don't need to be a helical locker or anything. Just, again, a good clutch pause is fine. We got the same thing in our car hauler, and I've never, you know, with the loads we put on that thing, I've never been anywhere that I had any problem with traction. So that'll be good. Also found out that the 2 rear ends I have are slightly different when it comes to pinion. Ford changed in '93 to a longer pinion for more spline penetration. Thankfully, this gear is for 93 and up. And then the yoke I had for the newer rear end is good. In fact, somebody's already put a speedy sleeve on it, but that's fine. We would have probably done that too. So the yoke's good. Don't have to worry about buying that. I've got a couple of covers. I'll clean up the best cover, best set of bolts. And I've done enough of these rear ends. I think I've got shims, and I've got a crush sleeve eliminator without having to buy, I didn't have to buy an install kit. I just bought a pinion bearing, and I think I've got everything else here. So we'll be assembling all of this, you know, after we finished up with this housing, and finish up, you know, but I've only got one side of the spring halfway done. And hopefully within a couple of days, we'll have this thing back on all four wheels and able to move it in and out of the shop, because I've got other things I need to do. So anyway, that's a lot of explanation for the project, a lot of details here. And some of this information I did not find on the internet. And you start researching differences between the F-250 and F-350, and nobody mentioned that brake mounting point. So maybe if you're remotely interested in some of this, maybe you'll learn something from our struggles. So anyway, I'll continue on. Thanks for watching. Okay, so 2 days of work later, here's the finished product, or at least sort of. I've still got a lot of things to hook up, drive shaft, bleed brakes, sway bar, things like that. But the rear end is built, fresh. Hubs are built, brakes built, everything ready to go, and wheels are bolted on, and you can see how narrow she's going to be, and that's exactly what I was after. And you can see that's how much tire clearance we had, which I think will be fine. We got about a ½ inch. And of course we had to trim our edges of our plates to clear the wheels, but that's not a problem. It's a little too dark on this side, but you see we're the same. So don't think that'll be a problem at all. And then we'll modify the wheel tubs on the bed as necessary. And then let me sight down the side of the truck, and you can see how nice and tucked that is. It's not going to take much, if anything, on the bed side as far as a fender. Like I say, more of a flare if we do anything. And I think that's really going to be a good look for the truck. I just like that dually look. I'm kind of thinking about going with some black wheels too. So that's just going to give it a real aggressive look, and I think it'll end up handling good and riding fine, and you know, we can haul and tow and do anything we want to with it. Got to get all the sway bar hooked up and shocks and so forth, but we got it in there, and I'm glad I don't have to build one of these rear ends very often. So anyway, I think I'm gonna call it quits for this video, and we'll pick back up on the next project. Thanks again for watching.